right, welcome back, ladies and gents. We're about halfway through this unit already. Today we are taking our notes on Unit 2, Lesson 4, Rotation. We're just going to jump right into it and get started and go from there. So a rotation. A rotation is a transformation in the coordinate plane that turns a figure. And I went ahead and underlined that. It's really important. That turns a figure. This figure remains congruent to the original figure. And today we're going to be focusing in on rotating about the origin. So rotating around that center point. And then there's three ways that we're rotating. 90 degrees counterclockwise, 180 degrees counterclockwise, and 270 degrees counterclockwise. Remember, counterclockwise is the opposite way that a clock would turn. So we're turning in this way kind of towards the left. We turn our paper like so because we're going counterclockwise. So our first rule, 90 degrees counterclockwise, our xy changes to the opposite of y, x. And we're going to write that on the outside first, and then we're going to change it to the inside. So not only are your x and y changing places, but your y is also changing to the inverse of what it started. So once again, xy changes to the opposite of y, x. Again, we're just changing that order, flipping that order, and making the y the opposite, so multiplying y by -1. So the first thing I want you to do with your quadrilateral out here is I want you to label your points. A, B, C, D. And then we're always going to write down our ordered pairs, our coordinates. It's just good practice. Okay, so A is at 2, 1. B is at 3, 5. C is all the way out at 5, 5. Yep. And D is at 6, 2. And we want to get to our new point. And we said when we go 90 degrees counterclockwise, we switch our order, so we're going to flip-flop my 1 and my 2 for A, and then make my old y coordinate the opposite. So the opposite of positive 1 is a -1, and then my x just goes second. So it becomes -1, 2. And do the same thing for B prime. I'm going to flip them and make my 5, the opposite of positive 5 is -5, and then my x just goes behind it. C prime, the opposite of positive 5 is -5, and then my x coordinate stays the same, it just goes second now. And D prime, the opposite of positive 2 is -2, and then 6. Once I have all of those new coordinates, I can plot my new points. A prime is at -1, 2. I label it with an apostrophe so I know that it's the new A. B prime is at -5, 3. C prime is at -5, 5. And D prime is at -2, 6. And then I connect my points, and my figure should look the exact same, just turned. And you can always check it by physically turning your paper. This is what your new figure should look like, which it does. So we did that one perfectly. So that was 90 degrees counterclockwise. 90 degrees counterclockwise, I'm going to make a little note down here at the bottom, or over to the side, I guess, is the same thing as 270 degrees clockwise. Those two rules will be the same when you're going clockwise versus counterclockwise. So I just like to make that note and put a little star next to it so I don't forget. Go ahead and close my 90 degrees counterclockwise and go into 180 degrees. 180 degrees, it doesn't matter if you're turning to the counterclockwise or clockwise. because you'll get to the same thing. And in this, on this rotation, it changes from a positive x, positive y, to the opposite of x, the opposite of y. So we're going to take both of our coordinates and multiply them by a -1 to turn them to the opposite. We're going to go ahead and open this middle flap. We're going to write our rule down again. The opposite of x, the opposite of y. Because if it started as a negative, it's going to change to a positive. Again, we're going to start the same way. We're going to label our coordinates, which is the same original shapes. We have our A, B, C, and D. My original A is at 2, 1. B is at 3, 5. I'll move my hand in a second. C is at 5, 5. And D is at 6, 2. Those are all of our original coordinates. Where I start counting from the origin. And now I'm going to rotate this figure. I'm going to turn it 180 degrees about the origin. So I'm going to change all of these by multiplying all of these numbers by a -1 to change them to the opposite. So my A prime is going to be at -2, -1, because the opposite of positive 2 is -2, opposite of positive 1 is -1. B prime is going to be at -3, -5. C prime is going to be at -5, -5. And D prime is going to be at -6, -2. They're all just changing to the opposite. They're staying in the exact same order, just changing to the opposite. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that. A, -2, -1. I always label my points so I know which one's which. B, at -3, -5. B prime. C prime is at -5, -5. And D prime is at -6, 2. And then I connect my dots. And I have my new figure. And again, my two figures should be congruent. They look the same. They just changed where they're at. Okay? We have one more rotation left, and that's my 270 degrees counterclockwise. 270 degrees counterclockwise. Oops. Make sure you can see it on the camera. And for this one, my xy is going to change to my y, the opposite of x. So again, I'm changing my order. My y is now going to come first, and then my x is changing to the opposite. My y, the opposite of x. Y, the opposite of x. Ah, I'm crooked. There you go. Perfect. 270 degrees counterclockwise is the same thing as 90 degrees clockwise. Sometimes it'll be given to you as clockwise, sometimes it'll be counterclockwise. So, it does vary back and forth. Okay? Before we do our rotation, we want to label our ordered pairs. Our A, B, C, and D. My A is at 2, 1. B is at 3, 5. C is at 5, 5. And D is at 6, 2. Now I'm going to rotate this figure 270 degrees counterclockwise. To do that, I'm going to need to flip the order. My y is going to come first, and then my x is going to change to the opposite of how it started. So when I flip my order, my 1 is going to come first. The opposite of positive 2 is -2. Once I apply the rule to one of the ordered pairs, I'm going to do the same thing to all of them. B prime is going to change. My y is going to go first. So 5, the opposite of positive 3 is negative 3. C prime, my y is coming first, so it'll be a 5. The opposite of positive 5 is negative 5. And our last one, D prime, my 2 is going to come first, and it's going to change to the opposite of positive 6, which is negative 6. I have all of these new ones, these new ordered pairs, and now I got to plot them. A prime is at 1, negative 2. B prime is at 5, negative 3. C prime is at 5, negative 5. And D prime is at 2, negative 6. And my apostrophes let me know that it's my new figure, my new ordered pair. And these two quadrilaterals should be congruent. Okay, that is our 3 different types of rotations. Remember, a rotation is just a turn. So if I take this paper and I turn it 90 degrees, that's my first rotation. Then turn it 180 degrees, 270 counterclockwise, and then back to my original would be 360. Okay, we're going to do some more activities with this in class. Hopefully you got your notes taken down, and they're ready for class tomorrow.